Well, good morning, Second Story. How's everybody doing today? Y'all good? It's great to see you today. I'm so glad that you're worshiping with us. Didn't these guys do an awesome job leading us today? That was so good. That was so good. We can say thank you better than that, can't we? There you go. There you go. There you go. All right. Well, hey, today we are wrapping up a series that we've been in these last number of weeks called Selfless. And as we do, we're coming to a story in the Old Testament. And it's about a guy named Saul, who was the king of Israel, and his son Jonathan, and Jonathan's armor bearer. Saul, just to give you a little background before we hit the scripture today, Saul had really kind of abdicated a lot of his leadership at this point in his reign as king. Saul was no longer committed to the ways of God, and he's begun to sort of manipulate a lot of people and God in the process to try to get the things that he wants. And as a result of that, he can't really hear the voice of God. And because of that, he's worried about a lot of things that God never intended for him to worry about. Did you know that happens? Like when you can't hear the voice of God, you end up worrying about things that you shouldn't necessarily be worrying about. And he's got his armies hiding away in rocks and in cliffs and in caves. They are much more concerned about avoiding the enemy than they are defeating the enemy. And maybe this is something for some of us that we can relate to a little bit this morning. We are hiders by nature. Amen? Yeah, we are. And those of you who didn't say amen, we know you're hiding, right? Ever since Adam and Eve, God went looking for them. They went hiding. Hiding is what we do. But this is kind of a moment where Saul is at in his life, where things just aren't really going well. And so enemies are circling up around him, and they're smelling blood in the water, and they're ready to move in for the kill. And then we come to this moment in 1 Samuel chapter 14, and I just want to read this together. This is a great story, one of the greatest stories, I think, in the Old Testament. But this is what it says in 1 Samuel 14. I'm going to start with verse 1, and then I'm going to jump to verse 3. It says, one day Jonathan, now Jonathan is Saul's son, okay? Jonathan said to his armor bearer, come on, let's go to where the Philistines have their outpost. But Jonathan did not tell his father what he was doing. It's very important to note that. I'm going to skip down to verse 3. It says, no one realized that Jonathan had left the Israelite camp. To reach the Philistine outpost, Jonathan had to go down between two rocky cliffs that were called Bozez and Senna. The cliff on the north was in front of Michmash, and the other on the south was in front of Geba. Let's go across the outpost. Let's go across to the outpost of those pagans. Now, listen, when the word is translated here, pagans, in a lot of translations it says, let's go to the outpost of those uncircumcised Philistines, okay? This is Jonathan kind of feeling his oats a little bit. He's talking some trash. He's talking some smack. He's kind of pumping himself up a little bit about what he wants to do. Let's go to the outpost of those pagans. Jonathan said to his armor bearer, perhaps the Lord will help us, for nothing can hinder the Lord. He can win the battle, whether he has many warriors or only a few. Do what you think is best, the armor bearer replied. I'm with you completely, whatever you decide. Well, all right then, Jonathan told him. We'll cross over and we'll let them see us. That sounds like a good plan, right? We're just going to let them see us. And if they say to us, stay where you are or we'll kill you, then we'll stop and not go up to them. But if they say, come on up and fight, then we will go up. That'll be the Lord's sign that he'll help us defeat them. When the Philistines saw them coming, they shouted, look, the Hebrews are crawling out of their little holes like girly men. Okay? That's how I hear it in my mind. I'm sorry, it is what it is. Move on. Verse 12. Then the men from the outpost shouted to Jonathan, come on up here and we'll teach you a lesson. Come on, climb right behind me, Jonathan said to his armor bearer, for the Lord will help us defeat them. So they climbed up using both hands and feet, and the Philistines fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer killed those who came behind them. They killed some 20 men in all, and their bodies were scattered over about half an acre. Suddenly, panic broke out in the Philistine army, both in the camp and in the field, including even the outposts and the raiding parties. And just then, an earthquake struck, and everyone was terrified. The title that I've taken from my message this morning is When Going Big is Going Home. When going big is going home. Would you pray with me? Jesus, as we wrap up this series and where we've been talking about what it means to experience more of you and less of ourselves, we do pray that you would just help us to empty ourselves today, that you would give us the courage to do a little self-evaluation about where we're at in this whole process, and that what we see in the mirror wouldn't just be a vague prayer for more of you, but that we would leave here today knowing that there are specific situations, there are specific circumstances, there are specific relationships, there are specific things we're going through where you have specific callings on our lives to stand tall and know your power. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Many of you know that when I'm not here at Second Story and when it's not summer, that in my 9-to-5 job, okay, when I'm in like Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent mode, when I'm doing that, I teach 7th grade at a local middle school. I teach English there. And I'm lucky enough to teach in the same school that Jess Swanson teaches at. She's on our staff here at church, and she and her husband Jacob and their family helped us start the church here. And Jess and I have classrooms that are about 2 doors down from each other in a 7th grade hallway. Now, as a part of our duties every single day at school, we're required to come out of our classrooms between the classes and just kind of stand in the hallway and do hallway duty to make sure that everything is happening out here that's supposed to be happening, okay? And that's kind of what we do as teachers. Well, one day last spring, Jess came up to me in the hallway. We were just kind of standing out there, and she said, "I'm just curious, why do you always stand like that?" I said, what are you talking about? This is just the way I stand. Is there a problem with the way I stand? You got a problem? I mean, it's not a thing. It's just the way I stand. She said, no. You always stand like this. And then she did this. And she spread her legs about 4 feet apart, and she crossed her arms. She said, "You always stand like this in the hallway. Like, do you have some personal problem I need to know about? Or are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm okay." And I looked down at myself, and sure enough, I'm just standing there like this. And I'm doing exactly what she said I was doing. And it was funny because I thought about it for just a second. And have you ever been unaware that you do something and then someone points it out and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I do that all the time." Has that ever happened to you? And it's funny because as soon as she said it, I realized I really do that quite a bit. Now, here's the thing. It's not a decision that I've made. It's not something where that's really comfortable for me to stand that way and therefore I choose it. It is my preferred posture. That's not it at all. It's just something that I do. And what was funny is that even though I wasn't aware that I was doing it, as soon as she pointed it out to me, I knew why I do it. I am by no means the tallest dude in the world, okay? But I'm 6'3", and I've been 6'3" since I was 12 years old. 12 years old, y'all. Let that sink in for just a second, okay? A 6'3", 6th grader. Now, how self-conscious would you be in that situation when all your friends and all the people you hang around with, they barely come up to your elbow? No joke. Okay, you should see my class pictures. It's like 6th grader, 6th grader, 6th grader, whoop, Seth, 6th grader, 6th grader. That's the way it is in every class picture, okay? I'm just saying. So because of this, ever since I was a kid, I have unconsciously had various ways that when I'm around people of bringing myself down to their level of where they're at. And sometimes it's just like I'll spread my feet far apart and I'll kind of cross my arms. Sometimes it's my posture, like I'll slouch, mainly from the shoulders, kind of coming down here like this a little bit. Sometimes I'll find a wall to lean up against, things like that. Anything will work, really. Now, when I'm in groups, even as an adult, I mean, I'm just telling you, this stuff runs deep, man. This runs real deep. I don't mean to. It's not something I do on purpose. But I often find myself using a posture for the purpose of shrinking myself to the level of the people around me. Isn't that kind of funny? Jess said, "Why are you standing like that?" But as soon as she said it, I was aware of this dynamic that I was unconsciously creating. I was doing it because when all the people I'm around are all smaller than me, is my assumption is that they're normal and I'm not. And that in order for me to be relatable, in order for me to kind of be able to be someone people can even talk to, I need to compromise the size that God gave me in some way. Now, this might not be the world's most profound sermon illustration, okay? But I found myself thinking about that conversation with Jess this week as I was reading this story from 1 Samuel, because each character in this story has a choice about how to handle their faith in the middle of a difficult circumstance. And the choice is really just this. Are you going to have a selfless faith? A big faith that's reliant on God and stands up to a big boy calling in front of you, or are you going to shrink yourself down to the level to where your faith is on the level of your circumstances? Which one is it going to be? And I know in how each one of them responds and stands up in this situation with their faith, it not only says a lot about the kind of God that they believe in, but it also says a lot about the kind of life they're going to live from this point on. And at this point in his life, Jonathan's dad, Saul had a shrinking kind of faith. This is Saul's faith. He is doing the splits. Man, he is all the way down as low as he can go. He's the king of Israel, but this is a dude who had learned to slouch a lot in his faith. He developed a really small, shrimpy, weakling kind of faith. It was a convoluted kind of faith, a circumstantial kind of faith. It was a faith that went its own way and then expected God to bail him out of his dumb decisions kind of faith. Not that anybody ever does that these days, but back in the day, there was a king who actually did that. It was a faith that lived at the level of his circumstances and his feelings, not his calling, his gifting, or his purpose. Are you with me so far? Okay? And it's kind of ironic because Saul himself, when we get a physical description of Saul in the Bible, Saul himself was not a small, shrimpy, weak kind of guy. The Bible describes Saul as having been very, very tall, that physically he was head and shoulders above most of his peers, and that he was extremely good looking. Extremely good looking. He was a guy that if you were looking for a cover model of Kings of Israel magazine, right? This is the guy. This is the guy you want. You'd expect him to be on the cover. He's the picture of what you'd want your enemies to see as they're thinking about attacking Israel. This guy, he is Chris Hemsworth as Thor leading the armies of the nation of Israel. But at this point in his life, Saul's become kind of devious, and he's become pretty manipulative and kind of a jerk to pretty much everyone. The power of being the king has become, it's like gone to his head so much that this big, powerful, strong, hunky hunk of a kingly king, okay? He's now like Simba hanging with Timon and Pumbaa, all right? That's what's going on. He's gone from just can't wait to be king to living off in the Shadowlands. And he's a shadow of himself. And he has a faith that stands down here. Get down to the level of your circumstances. Feet apart, shrinking to fit the people around him. In becoming king and getting everything he wanted, in becoming king and doing that, Saul ended up with more of himself and less of God. So he stands with his feet apart in the hallway while his enemies are passing by. And they are not scared of him, and they are not intimidated, and they are ready to take him out. And I'm wondering today, I'm just wondering if you've ever found yourself in that situation where you have found out that there are circumstances that when you are standing in these circumstances in your life, you might not be aware of it. You might not know consciously that you're doing it. You don't have anybody in the hallway calling you out saying, hey, well, why are you standing that way? Why are you doing that? Why are you shrinking yourself down? But the reality is that you have circumstances in your life that when you stand in them, you bring your faith down to their level. You ever come at your finances with your shoulders slumped and your feet wide apart in your spirit? You ever do that? You ever go to parent your kids with a faith that's shrinking down to the level of the circumstances around you? You ever feel like in order to be just relatable to the people around you, just to be someone who people can relate to and be liked by them and be accepted by them, that you have to make your faith shrink down a couple feet so you can get down on their level? Hey, look, listen to this. Have you ever been in a relationship? Okay? You ever been in a relationship and thought, listen, if I don't bring my faith down a couple notches, this dude's gonna leave me. He's not staying in this. This one's gonna walk away. If I don't dial down all the Jesus-y kind of stuff, if I don't back off those values a little bit, if I don't compromise, if I don't make some kind of deal here and bring the volume of it down, if I don't stay quiet about it and just go along with what they want and shrink that faith down in me a couple levels, then I won't be the king or I won't be the queen that they want me to be. Come on, somebody. Can anybody relate to that? Yeah? Listen, anytime we get filled with more of ourselves and less of God, okay, more of ourselves, meaning our pride, our insecurity, our depression, our fears, our worries, our hurts, our wounds, our friends, and the company we keep. Come on. Anytime we give those things in our lives a higher seat or a louder voice in our spirits than we give to the Word of God, our feet, which should be planted on solid ground and standing us straight up, we move them just a little bit farther apart and we shrink down to the level of our circumstances instead of demanding that our circumstances rise up to the standard of our faith. That's how we live. Now, into this situation comes Jonathan. And Jonathan is Saul's son, and Jonathan he's one of the coolest guys in Scripture. Jonathan is one of the most selfless guys you're ever going to meet in the Bible. Jonathan is the next in line to be the king, but he's not going to be the king. The next king is going to be David. And Jonathan knows that. But Jonathan has a servant. He's an armor bearer. And armor bearer is just a Hebrew way of saying water boy, okay? When it comes to battles that people are doing. If you have an armor bearer, they're just here to what do you need? I'll just give you your stuff. That's just what I'm here to do. Jonathan doesn't have much of a street rep at this point, and the armor bearer is never going to have a street rep. But Jonathan isn't hung up in his feelings about the circumstances. His dad's leadership that has brought them to this place that's kind of a bad place to be. And Jonathan isn't hung up in it. He's not depressed about it. He's not scared of it. He lets his faith stand up tall. And he says, because the God that's in me is bigger than I am, because I have more of him in me and less of myself, I know that my God outweighs my circumstances. So maybe if I give him a chance, he'll act on my behalf. And perhaps he might choose to save us. It's possible that what I can see with my eyes can be overcome by what I see with my faith. So maybe it's time for somebody around here to stop shrinking away from the battle that they're called to fight and start living with a faith that says to its circumstances, you need to get on my level. You need to come up here and start living with a faith that it says greater is he that is in me than the one that is in the world. Maybe it's time for somebody to get more into what God can do than they are afraid of what they can't do. Is anybody here today facing a battle like that, where you need more of God and less of you, where it's time to stop letting your circumstances dictate the size of your faith, and it's time to let your faith start making some demands of your circumstances? Does that describe anybody here today? Come on, let's say it with me. It's time to go big. Let's say it again. It's time to go big. Real quick, I want to talk with you today about 2 ways your faith can grow taller in your circumstances today. You can stand a little more on solid ground and no more slouching over. No more standing with your feet as wide as you can get them to get down on the level that you feel like you need to get to. 2 ways you can see more of God and less of you and grow a few inches as a result in your faith. Can we talk about that this morning? All right. Number 1 is this. Your faith is going to grow to the size of your maybe. Your faith is going to grow to the size of your maybe. Look at what Jonathan said in verse number 6. He said, let's go across to the outpost of those dirty dogs, those uncircumcised Philistines, those good-for-nothings. Let's go to those pagans. Jonathan said to his armor bearer, perhaps the Lord will act and he will help us. For nothing can hinder the Lord. He can win the battle, whether he has many warriors or only a few. I want you to notice that there's nowhere in here, there's nowhere in the text that Jonathan says, God told me to go to the outpost of the pagans. This isn't a direct order. Okay? Nowhere in the text does it say that Jonathan got a word from the Lord that was a guarantee that number 1, this is what you should be doing, and number 2, it's going to work. Okay? There's nowhere in the text where Jonathan says he's totally certain of the outcome. In fact, if we evaluate his idea purely on its own merits, this is a really stupid idea. This is really dumb. It's not just bad strategically, it's bad in every way. That you're going to get everybody killed. This is a really bad idea. There's a lot of Philistines. There's 2 of them. Jonathan and the armor bearer. That's it. That's all we've got. Like, what are you trying to prove, dude? Like, maybe you should bring at least a squad with you. Like, bring some people other than you and the armor. Like, what are you doing here? If I'm the armor bearer and Jonathan's like, let's go, I'm like, have fun, right? I'm not going with you on that. So unless God has directly told you to do this, I'm not going with you. All Jonathan has is a perhaps and a maybe. In fact, watch this. Samuel wants us to know that just in order to get to the Philistine outpost, I'm not even talking about the fight yet. Just to get to the Philistine outpost, Jonathan had to climb through 2 cliffs, Bozez and Seneh. Bozez means slippery, Seneh means thorny. Nobody said that this is going to be easy. Nobody did. Nobody said that stepping out in faith is going to feel good all the time. Nobody promised that you're not going to have to navigate circumstances in your life that aren't slippery on the one hand or thorny on the other. Life is complicated, man. Life is difficult. Life is messy. David said that God walks with him, Psalm 23, through the valley of the shadow of death, right? Shadow of death. That's where he says, I fear no evil. David did not say that God walks with me through the fields of daisies and wildflowers, skipping through them like an 18-year-old girl at her senior picture shoot, okay? That's not what he said. He said it's the valley of the shadow of death. That's not a fun place to be. But sometimes to get your faith to stand up straight in your circumstances, you have to say to yourself, I know this is going to be slippery. I know it's going to be thorny. I know I may have to face some things in my life that I don't really want to face. I might have to do some things that I would rather not do. I might have to repair a relationship that's going to be hard. I might have to say I'm sorry. I might have to own my past. I might need to be honest about the fact that I'm living beyond my means. I'm avoiding hurts inside of me, and it's affecting the people around me. I want my kids to like me, so I'm sidestepping the confrontations I need to have with them, come on, about their behavior. I want my boyfriend. I want my girlfriend. I want my husband. I want my wife. I want them to love me, but I'm going to navigate the slippery and the thorny things of life in that relationship with my faith, not with my feelings. Because if I do that, then maybe God will act on my behalf. Is this making sense to anybody? Maybe God. Maybe God. We talked about this last week, but the proof positive that you're walking dead in the middle of God's will for your life, is not that your life is easy. That's not the proof that God is with you. If you're looking for the proof that God is with you because you know everything's just easy, you're going to be waiting for proof for a long time. It doesn't mean that it feels good. I racked my brain this week. I seriously can't think of any one person in the Bible who lived a selfless life before God and did something significant on God's behalf. I can't think of one person who got that call to God to do that thing that they did, and they were like, no problem. I got that. That's not even a thing. I got you, God. Say less. I feel great about this. It's totally within me to do that. In fact, I'm pretty sure that it's the opposite. That God specifically calls us to circumstances that unless you get a lot more reliant on Him and a lot less reliant on yourself, we don't have a chance. We don't even have a chance. The cliffs are too slippery. And they're just too thorny. There's a reason that the rich young ruler walked away sadly from Jesus. There's a reason that Zacchaeus was up in a tree. There's a reason that the woman with the issue of blood tried to keep her distance and just reach for the hem of the garment instead of the face of the man. There's a reason that the woman caught in adultery expected judgment. There's a reason Moses wouldn't embrace his calling because he stutters. There's a reason Jonah got ticked off and was pouting under a tree, because when your faith is in yourself, the size of your maybe shrinks. It shrinks. You won't navigate the slippery slopes and thorny hillsides. You won't do the hard work. And here's the thing, you're going to tell people that you believe, but your actions will reveal who your faith is really in. What Jonathan knew is that just because I'm in an uncertain place doesn't mean that I have an uncertain purpose. Let that sink in. I can be in an uncertain place and still have a certain purpose. Just because God didn't say to you, okay, here's how we're going to fix everything in your life. Here's step number 1. Here's step number 2. Here's step number 3. Come on, little buddy. Come on, little camper. You can do it. You can, just because God didn't speak it audibly to you doesn't mean that you don't know that you're within His character and His personality and within His power to pursue it. Okay? Jonathan's faith is in who God is. It is his understanding of who God is that determines the size of the maybe that he's willing to act on. And listen, I want to be real clear about this, okay? Having faith doesn't mean that you become someone who just kind of goes out into your life is like, well, I don't know, like maybe anything, and you just do stuff, okay? Because that's not what Jonathan's doing here. You go out and you do stupid stuff. Having faith doesn't mean that you don't have strategy. Having faith doesn't mean that you don't think things through or that you aren't intentional in the way that you stand up tall and live big in your faith. Faith is something that says this. It says, based on what I know of God and what I know about what God wants, and based on what I know God is like, and based on what I've experienced of God, maybe there's a way forward here. Maybe there's something that can be done. Maybe there's a reason for hope. Jonathan's maybe is based on who he knows God is and how God works. Hebrews 11:1 says, faith shows the reality of what we hope for. It's the reality of what we hope for. It is the evidence of things we cannot see. So, I haven't seen it yet. I don't know it in detail yet, but I know it would be within God's character to do it. Does that make sense? So I'm going to take a chance that's not calculated by how I feel. It's calculated by who I know God to be. Are you with me? Come on, church, are you with me? This is heavy stuff, okay? That's a great place to be. When I'm calculating my maybe based on who God is, not who I am. And you know what that means? And I don't know about you, I have found this in my own life so many times. It means that when you come to the really hard things of life, I'm talking about the battles that I want to shrink away from. This is just what I've found. Okay, the circumstances where I'm tempted to shrink it down, to take it down to a different level, right? Things that I'm scared to let my faith stand tall in over and over again. This is what God has taught me in my own life, that faith allows me to approach those situations from a posture of being less certain, but more confident. Does that make sense? That sounds weird, I know. I'm less certain of how this is going to go, but I'm more confident of where it's going to end up. And I don't know how we're going to solve this. I don't know how we're going to get through this situation. I don't know how it's going to work out. And if I'm honest, I feel like complete garbage in the middle of this. This is not a fun place to be. This might be the hardest thing I ever do, but I've lived through enough with Jesus at this point in my life that I know that no matter what the circumstances are, no matter who leaves, no matter who dies, no matter what dies, no matter what I'm facing, no matter how loud my circumstances yell at my faith to come down to their level, here's what I've learned. I know enough to know that no matter what happens, this isn't going to kill me. It's not going to kill me. Things that I've been through have tried to kill me, okay? People have tried, meaner people than you. And it hasn't worked. Yet I'm still here. My faith has survived financial hardship. My faith has survived depression. My faith has survived crappy circumstances. My faith has survived physical problems. That's not because I'm great at faith. That's because God is great at being faithful. Okay? So I'm finding that the older that I get, it's this weird thing that I'm more open to facing things that come with a maybe kind of faith. Maybe God. Situations that require me to say maybe. It's possible. First of all, because I've already seen him do so much that I never thought I'd see him do. And second, because even though I'm not certain it's going to work out, I'm confident that, watch this, even if it does kill me, and someday I am going to die, I'm still going to be okay. I'm still going to, in every circumstance life can throw at me, there is now nothing that can separate me from the love of God in Christ Jesus. There's nothing you're going through that he won't face it with you. So even if I do die, and someday I will, like Paul said, I'm going to find out that to live is Christ and to die is gain. It's gain. Guys, listen, you got battles you're facing today where before you can even get into the battle with the circumstances in front of you, the first battle you've got to fight is the battle for your maybe. Victory is going to require you to be vulnerable and put yourself out there on a maybe. You're not going to get a promise and a guarantee and a certain outcome. you're going to have to put yourself out there on a maybe. When you start with faith, answering the really big questions of life, you're going to find your faith standing taller and getting bigger maybes out of you. But when you start with the maybes, you're going to find your faith shrinking to the size of your circumstances. Does that make sense? You with me so far? Okay. The second thing I want to talk about is this text is so rich. I had a whole third point all about how your faith will grow to the size of your friends. And I was going to talk to you a little bit about not only who Jonathan trusted his plans with, but who he didn't trust his plans with, how he told the armor bearer, but he didn't tell Saul because he knew that if I tell Saul, if I tell my dad, a man who is far away from God and is about the things of God, if I trust God's calling on my life to him, he's going to kill it before it ever begins. Have you ever known anyone like that in your life? I had a whole third point about that. We don't have time for it. It's a different sermon. So let's get back to this, okay? Second thing, last thing I want to talk to you about is this. Your faith will grow to the size of your God. Your faith is going to grow to the size of your God. I want to rewind the tape back to verse number 6. Look at what it says. Perhaps who? I'm sorry, who? Perhaps the Lord will help us, for nothing can hinder the Lord. Who can win the battle? He can win the battle whether who has many warriors? He has many warriors or only a few. Who's Jonathan's faith in, himself or God? God, right? People who go big with their faith, like Jonathan, here's what they find out. That over and over and over again in the Bible, when we see people who are living a truly selfless life, when you go big with your faith, you bet big, you act big, you live bold, strategic, but bold, when you put it all on God and you say, God, you're the only one. You're the only one who can fix this. You're the only one who can handle this. You're the only one who can do this. You're the only one who pay for this, parent this, walk through this. I need your power, your grace, your love, your strength, your mercy. Here's what happens when you see people do that. It doesn't lead you farther away from your home and where you want to be. It leads you back into and deeper to it. Back into and deeper to it. A couple days ago, I was at the gym and I was sitting in the steam room after the workout. I like to sit in there sometimes because I'm a little bit of a glutton for punishment. And sitting in there, and for whatever reason, the steam room that day was just crazy hot, way hotter than it normally is, and just filled with smoke. You can't even see from one end of the steam room to the other just because of how much like mist is in there. And I sat down, and almost as soon as I did, I heard a voice from out of the steam asking me the question, true story. He said, "Do you mind if I ask what you do for a living?" Like, what? What's going on here? He said, "Well, you're here in the middle of the day on a weekday. I just was curious what you do for a living." And I was like, "Well, I could ask you the same question, you turkey. What are you talking about? We're both in here. What are you all up in my business for?" Now, listen. I'm not trying to offend anybody here. I'm not. I'm just going to tell you, when I go to the gym, okay, I'm not here to talk to people, okay? I'm not. I'm not here to be social. I just want to get in my zone and get the work done and and clear out the day in my mind and just move on. You know what I mean? That's what I'm here for. So I'm not here to develop relationships and friends. I have all the friends that I thank you, they're good. But I don't want to talk to this guy. I don't want and so I figure I've got two options here. The question is, what do I do for a living? If I tell this guy that I teach 7th grade, all I'm going to get is a story about how he hated 7th grade. Okay? That's what happens when I tell people I teach 7th grade. Okay? But if I tell this guy that I'm a pastor, let's go through door number 2, okay? One of two things is going to happen. We at least have a chance. He's either going to tell me his whole life story, that happens a lot too, okay? Or he will shrink back into the mist and say nothing again. That's what's going to happen. It's a roll of the dice, but at least you got a fighting chance to kind of get through on this one. And so, it's awful. So I took the chance. I'm going to give you a chance to go back to the mist. I told them, so I'm a pastor. And from there, I saw a big, long, sweaty hand come out to me like he wanted to shake my hand and just say, hello, how's it going? Okay? He said, no, this is true. He goes, my name is Ruben, and I'm from Mexico, and I met Jesus when my mother passed away in 2008. I was raised Catholic, so I knew who Jesus was, but it was never real to me till my mother died, and then I needed Jesus more than I ever needed Jesus in my life, And Ruben started going on and on and on and on about all the things that God has walked him through and got him through and traveled through with him, and how much Jesus means to him, and how he trusts God with everything that he does, because that's the only way you could possibly live. How could anyone live any other way? I don't even know. And he asked about our church, and he asked about our ministry, and he asked about the history of how we got started, and he asked, because he's Mexican, if we're bilingual, and can I bring my friends to your church? No joke, he's asking me all this stuff. Meanwhile, I'm getting so hot, I feel like I'm going to die. Like, it's just awful in here. I don't know how Ruben is even speaking at this point. He was in there before I got there, and he was there when I left. So as soon as I could sense an opening and he hit the pause button, I told Ruben, I really love that you've got this great faith story, and it's awesome to meet you. But if I don't get out of here, I'm going to meet Jesus in person a lot sooner than I was planning on. So I got to get out of here. And I went and I took a shower, and I'm just like, wow, I'm just overwhelmed. I'm a little dizzy. The blood is rushing back to my head at this point. I came out of the shower, no joke. Ruben is sitting on a chair outside the steam room, and watch this. He's talking to a young man in his 20s. Looks like he's in his 20s. And he's sitting on another chair, and all I heard of the conversation, this is all I heard, was Ruben saying, listen, man, I don't know you very well, but I can tell that you see in your situation, you need a lot of hope. And let me tell you, I've had troubles in my life, but I put my hope in Jesus. And Jesus is the only place you can put your hope. And you need to find a church and a family to surround you and support you. That is the only kind of hope that is worth having in this life. I just smiled as I'm walking back to my locker, listening to Ruben. And I thought to myself, shame on you, Pastor. Yeah, awful. It's okay to take time for yourself in your workout, but if you don't see every soul in here the way that Ruben sees them, if you don't see them the way that God sees them, if your faith is just going to stay in your mind and stay in your heart, and you're just going to be so full of yourself in those situations, how do you expect to create any room for God to do something incredible? How do you expect to do that? I just want everyone to leave me alone. Reuben looked at everyone in that gym and said, maybe God. Perhaps God. I don't know, could be God. Maybe he will act on my behalf. Whose God is bigger that afternoon, Reuben's or mine? It's Reuben. Reuben wins. Okay? When we are more filled with ourselves than we are of God, you not only shrink yourself, you not only shrink your own life, you shrink your God. In those moments, I'm trusting that I'm more capable of living life down here and managing my circumstances and my people down here than I am of believing that if I let my faith prop me up and stand me tall, that God can do more than I can ask or imagine where he's called me to be. See, your faith will only grow to the size that you think God can grow you to in your life. When we get into those situations, it's important to remember what Jonathan said. I know I can't save us. I know my dad definitely isn't going to save us, but maybe God can do this. There's nothing God can't do, whether he has the numbers in his favor or not. And I don't know how he's going to do it. But if I give him a chance, I know he can. Now, that doesn't always mean that I'm going to get the miracle that I'm wanting. But it does mean that the faith that I act on reveals the size that I believe God to be. A little bit of faith gets you a little bit of God who you don't think was going to do too much in your life. Won't deliver you from much, won't heal you from much, won't walk with you through much. A little faith gets you a little God who will never act beyond what you think or what you experience because you won't grow yourself to believe that he's bigger than you. It's a faith that's for Sundays only, right? And that's if I'm not going to the cabin. It's a circumstantial kind of faith. A big faith is a faith that says, if I make my bed in the heavens, you are there. Or if I make my bed in the pit of hell, you are there. Either way, you are God, and I am not. My circumstances are not. My fears are not. My feelings are not. It's time for me to stand up tall and have a big boy faith where there's more of him and less of me. Reuben doesn't have a small God. Okay? That dude was in the steam room for twice as long as I was. I don't even know how he did it. I don't even know how he did it. A big faith can take a lot of heat, man. Big faith can take a lot of heat. Church, it's time to stand up tall and live out a big faith in a big God in your life. This week we've got in front of us is a special week. It's going to be fun. We've got a lot of opportunities to serve our community. There's openings available. We talked about it earlier in the service. I know it's summer. I know we've all got a lot going on. I do too. But you know, this isn't stuff we're doing for kicks or because we're bored. We do it because we really do believe that everybody's story is better with Jesus in it. We do it because we have to sometimes be intentional in the way that we go from here to getting our feet where they need to be, standing up and serving others. Put that faith into action. Stand up tall. We have an opportunity today to give in our special Selfless offering where we're asking our church to go above and beyond their normal tithes and offerings. And we've been talking about this the last few weeks. Again, I know it's summer. I know. I get it. I know we've got some people who've been out of town and missing things here and there, but the real question for both of these things, in the way that we serve, in the way that we give, in the way that we choose whether or not to, even the stuff we've got coming up the next couple of weeks, dedicate our kids to the Lord. Take that step of baptism. Walking out our faith with God like that. All of these are things that we've got opportunities in front of us to do. And all we're doing is asking the question, are we going to stand down to the level of our circumstances? Or are we going to stand up tall to be the people he's called us to be? A church that serves and gives and is dialed into the situation, saying, maybe God will act on our behalf. Perhaps the Lord will help us, for nothing can hinder the Lord. He outweighs my experience. He makes miracles possible in his grace for me to stand up and be the human being he's called me to be. What would you stand up tall to today? What circumstances in your life do you need to stand up in the middle of today? You don't have to stand up to all of them at once. Just pick one thing that's pressing in on you. What do you need to stand up in the middle of? I want to invite you to together, let's give those to God this morning. So I want to invite you to bow your heads and close your eyes. And we're just going to say a prayer and invite God into those situations. Ask him to help us be selfless, to be a people who go big with our faith, because it's the only way to get to the home we want it to be. Jesus, each one of us here comes to you with unique circumstances. We each come to you with unique problems and pressures and pressure points. We all come to you with different relationships, different backgrounds. We all come to you from different experiences we've had this week. We pray for every man, every woman, every child at Second Story Church that you would just give us the courage, give us the faith, give us the grace to get our feet underneath us on solid ground, to remember that we are who you say we are, not who our feelings tell us we are, not who our circumstances call us to be. You are our God, our Master, our Savior, the one to whom we are called, the one who gives us the grace and power and purpose in the middle of those situations, the one who walks with us through them, even if it's the valley of the shadow of death. And so we give those situations to you today. We surrender them to you. We release them to you. God, take them out of our hands and put them into yours. Physically feel yourself releasing those things to God today. And know that he is with you as you stand tall with a faith that says, Jesus, I need more of you, less of me. We give you these things today in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. Amen. Is that good? It's good, isn't it? It's hard to release things to God, but it feels lighter on the other side. Hey, next week, we're going to be starting a brand new series called Summer in the Psalms. I want you to check out this screen in back of me.